Station, this is Houston. Are you ready for the event?
Yes, I'm ready for the event.
KMA Radio, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
Station, this is Mike Peterson with KMA Radio. How do you hear me?
Your first words were cut off, but I think I hear you.
Peggy, thank you very much for doing this interview with us, and thanks to NASA as well. First of all, the last time we talked to you was back in November from Baikonur Cosmodrome, just before you were launched to the International Space Station. Talk about the decision to extend your mission from April, when you were originally expected to come down, through early September. What went into that decision?
Actually, it was just a coincidence of incidents that happened here on board. Russians decided they were only going to have a total of one crew member instead of the normal two that they would have on board, 2 or 3. And so during that time period, we wanted to have a crew of 3 on board instead of just 2 crews. So I agreed to stay on and come home with the next Soyuz, the subsequent Soyuz, which should have me coming home in early September then.
By the time you return in September, you will log something like 600 days in space. In the time you've been aboard in this third stay, have you noticed any changes in your health or your body in the additional time that you've been aboard the space station?
Actually, I don't think the changes are particularly noticeable while you're up here. I think it'll be, like it always has been, a much more sobering affair to return to that 1G life on the planet Earth. It takes me, the first couple of days are difficult from a neurovestibular perspective. And then after that, it's, even though I maintain my muscle strength, I think, very well doing all the exercise that we do up here, I find that the fast twitch muscles, the things that require faster response times, are slow to pick up and remember that you're back on Earth, and because up here things don't require a lot of speed or motion to get things moving, and so those muscles forget how they're supposed to work, I think.
The information that you're gleaning from the additional time in space as NASA plans for long-range missions to Mars, perhaps back to the Moon, how is that going to be helpful in NASA's planning for the long-range space missions in the future?
Well, it's good for us to have additional people that are staying a little bit longer on board the space station to try and understand those slightly longer durations. Right now, we've got a pretty good database of 6-month flyers on board station, and so the natural extension is important for us, particularly if we go on trips to Mars, where those trips may last anywhere between 6 and 9 months just to get there. So we need to have a good understanding of how our bodies are going to respond when we get back to a gravity environment, and an understanding of what happens over the course of that time period. So I'm, I guess, an additional data point for NASA. And, of course, just the generic science that we're able to accomplish with more crew members on board here has also been a huge plus.
Speaking of the crew members, you've had kind of a change in personnel in the months that you've been aboard the space station. Some of the Russian crew members and other international crew members have come and gone. What's it like to have to adjust to having new crew members come aboard the station during the last few months? Or what goes into that?
Well, actually, during Expedition 16, we were also changing out crew members via the shuttle, so one out of 3 of the crew members was changing. It was a kind of a dramatic change for me to go from the original crew that was with us for the first 5 months or so, 5.5, 6 months, and to have 2 of those crew members leave. Shane had left on a previous Soyuz flight, and so there was an adjustment there in April when he left, and then when Thomas and Oleg left in June, another adjustment. There was some overlap there when Jack Fisher arrived, and so we had some adjustment time period there before, this most recent change 2 weeks ago or a week and a half ago with the newest crew that arrived with Randy Bresnik, Paolo Nespoli, and Sergei Ryzhikov. So it's been a continually changing process, and from observation of being able to see those changes, I think it's neat to see how one personality can make a huge difference in just the interactions of the crew. It's I think very impressive.
We're talking with astronaut Peggy Whitson aboard the International Space Station this morning. Peggy, back in April, you did set the record for cumulative time for a U.S. astronaut. What's it like to be included now amongst the space legends that we've talked about? Armstrong, Glenn, Shepard, Gagarin, Sally Ride. What's it like to be included amongst those people now as the all-time record holder for a U.S. astronaut in space?
Well, I'm not sure I'd put myself in that same category, but I do think that having records, breaking records all the time is important for NASA. It shows that we are still progressing, we are still doing new things, and continuing to expand on what we know about space. And so I think it's very important for us to be breaking records, important for all of NASA. So it gives me pride to be a part of that.
Also this time aboard, you have set the record for the number of spacewalks by a female astronaut. I have you at 10, and if I'm shorting you, let me know. But talk about the work that goes into preparing for a spacewalk. How much work do you do either on the ground or when you're up there to get ready for a spacewalk? And what are some of the challenging aspects of being in outer space and relying on your spacesuit to keep you protected?
That's a really great question, and there's a lot of preparation that's involved. Just the physical preparation, being able to work in a suit that's pressurized. That means that every time you move your hands out or in, basically anytime you move your hands from a relaxed position, it's going to take energy and strength. And since we are, quote, walking on our arms, we have to have a lot of arm strength, forearm strength, hand strength is very important. And so we do exercises on the ground to prepare us for that. Obviously, we continue those exercises up here in space because we want to be able to preserve that strength in order to do the spacewalk. The other preparation that you have to do is just the practice. We practice in a neutral buoyancy laboratory. Basically, it's a really large swimming pool with piece parts of the International Space Station underneath the water. They're mock-ups of the station, but they're full-size mock-ups. And so we can't even get the whole station inside this pool because it's so large. But we practice all the different scenarios that we might imagine doing up here. And that kind of trains you generically to do any task, because I've done tasks up here before on spacewalks that were not planned, and I had never practiced before. So it's a really good training program, I think, because it gives you this great base from which they can build and provide training materials on orbit here for those specific situations that were not planned for and we had not specifically trained for. So I really think we've got a great training program for that. We also have like a virtual reality view, so we can kind of fly around on the computer and see where we'll be going and try and understand how we would translate to get to certain locations. Where's the best place to, put my body restraint tether and all that kind of thing, so we can plan it out in advance.
Peggy, we've run out of time. Thank you very much for speaking to us, for taking time out to do this. We wish you good luck and Godspeed on your return to Earth next month, and we hope to be talking to you when you're back here on the ground after you get back. Thank you very much for being with us this morning.
Well, thank you so much, and good morning to all the local area in Shenandoah.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the KMA Radio portion of the event. Please stand by for a voice check from space.com.
Is that me?
I'm not copying. How do you hear me? Space.com, how do you hear me?
I hear you loud and clear. How do you hear me?
I have you loud and clear now as well.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for speaking with us today. I understand that this has been a very long and eventful trip for you to the International Space Station. So how long have you been there now, and what have been some of the highlights of your mission?
I think I'm around 630 some days. Highlights have obviously been 4 different spacewalks, but I've really enjoyed a lot of the different scientific research I've done this time. My background is in biochemistry, and doing some of the studies on the cell cultures, looking at cancerous lung cells and different drug treatment things, as well as bone cells. So we're doing a lot of interesting research this time around. So I would have to say that's some of my highlights as well. But being in space every day is a highlight. It's hard to pick just one.
Great. And so speaking of science, I'm wondering if you plan to watch the total solar eclipse on August 21st, and if you'll be doing any science with that, or just kind of watching and taking pictures, or what are your plans?
We have plans to take pictures and watch during the eclipse. Our orbits won't be terribly close. I think they said around 1,700 miles. But we're still hoping to be able to see it on 3 different orbits around the Earth. So that'll be interesting, fun. My first time to see an eclipse from up here.
And so you're coming home in September, and I'm wondering, what are you most looking forward to when you return to Earth? And are there maybe any foods that you're really looking forward to eating that you haven't been able to eat in space?
Well, obviously, I'm looking forward to seeing friends and family, and but I would have to say the thing I've been thinking about the most, kind of been fantasizing a little bit about different foods that I want to make and vegetables that I want to saute, things that I've missed up here.
And so after you return home, do you have any plans to maybe go on a vacation, or are you going back to work? And if you do go back to work, what kind of work would that entail?
The first 45 days after we land from a long-duration space flight, we are doing rehabilitation, trying to get our bodies used to being on Earth again. We do a lot of the baseline data collections, the final data collections for all the experiments that have been running since before we launched. So there's many investigations on the human body that we've been doing up here on orbit. And so we'll have to continue those studies as well during that first 45 days. Some of those will last out to 6 months, where we're doing data collections to continue that process. In addition to that, we're doing a lot of debriefs, talking to the ground teams about procedures that worked really well, procedures that we need to try and improve on, tools or hardware things that we had issues with, just ideas of how to operationally improve the efficiencies up here so that we can get even more done. So that first 45 days is actually going to be very busy. I put in for about 4 weeks of vacation between now and Christmas, but the big vacation plan is a trip on a boat in February with my husband and some friends. That'll be a lot of fun.
That sounds fabulous. So do you have any intention to try to return to space again after this, or is that kind of too far in the future to plan right now?
Well, I imagine that that's probably not going to be an option for me, but if I had the opportunity to, I would definitely return here. Every day is extremely satisfying. I find the work here, it directly relates to us extending our capabilities in space. And so it's very gratifying every day, even if I'm doing something like cleaning filters or vents or whatever. I'm keeping the station alive. We're continuing studies and research and finding out more. And so it's one of the most gratifying experiences I've had in my life.
And so you've also broken a lot of spaceflight records at this point. And so I'm wondering, are there any records left for you to break?
Well, I could be even older. That's not necessarily a record I went after, but being the oldest woman in space. So there's that.
And so which would you say that you're the most proud of, or that you had to work the hardest to achieve?
Well, I think a lot of the records just had to be involved being, in the right place, having worked hard for many years. So it's hard to say. I think probably being the first female commander on the station was important. I actually think probably being the first chief of the female chief of the astronaut office was also pretty important.
Do you have any advice or words of wisdom for maybe young kids or little girls who are interested in growing up to be an astronaut just like you?
Well, I would say pick any field in math, science, or engineering, and one that you really enjoy, that drives you, that gives you some passion, and pursue it. I would also say that for me in particular, trying to do more than I might have thought was possible was very important, I think, in leading to the eventual successes that I've had the privilege to experience. So I would say live just a little bit outside your comfort zone. Push yourself to more than you think you might imagine you could do.
Great. And so why do you think that spaceflight is really important? And so the work that you do at the International Space Station, all the research, why do you think that this is really an important thing that we should invest in?
Well, I think the research that we do up here is going to pay off in lots of different ways. There's many different spin-off examples of things that are now used on Earth. But for instance, one of the research experiments that I was working on 2 weeks ago, we were looking at cancerous lung cells growing as tissue culture, and we were testing a new drug that is attached to an antibody that would specifically attack those cancer cells. And so the scientists on the ground will give all the quantitative results, but just looking through the microscope, it looked like they were doing the job because they were killing the cancer cells. What that will lead to in the future, I don't directly know the answer to, but it is a key part of research that I think will help in understanding. And that's what I can say about so many of the different research projects that we're working on. Some of them are very basic principles of capillary action and capillary flow. Physical actions like how fires burn in zero gravity, that could apply to future space flights, future spacecraft. So there are so many applications that apply not only to the future exploration of space, but also directly to on Earth. We're testing other drugs to maintain bone density, because obviously this environment up here, we lose bone density much more quickly. We're looking specifically at mechanisms for how that's happening and trying to understand that. And that may, in the future, allow us to develop better ways to mitigate osteoporosis, for instance. So they're like research on the grounds. It takes many years to get a final answer. But each step, I think, is very important.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Peggy. Thank you for your time, and I wish you the best of luck in the rest of your space adventures.
Thank you very much. It was great talking to you, too.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the event.
And thank you, KMA Radio and Space.com. Station, we are now resuming operational audio communication.